Hey everybody, at home at Old Guy Hi-Fi channel. Hope everyone's doing well today. Today should be an interesting video. This is a very interesting product. We're going to talk about the 3E Audio A7 Class D amplifier, and this is different than what you've seen before. So sit back, relax, and we're going to talk about this fascinating product.
Old Guy Hi-Fi talking true, stereo dreams he shares with you. Feel the rhythms break through, music's heartbeat soft but true.
So what is the 3E Audio A7? Well, obviously it's a Class D amplifier. It is available, configured in two different ways, or two different power supplies. One is with a 48 volt 5 amp at $268, or a 48 volt 10 amp at $299. But be aware, that's the 48 volt 10 amp power supply. It's a weapon, it's huge. And that's the way I tested it, and it worked quite well. So let's talk about the specifications on this real quick. It does use two of the Texas Instruments TPA 3255 amp chips in a fully balanced configuration. With the 10 amp power supply, it is rated at 140 watts into 8 ohms at less than 1% THD. It is rated at 250 watts into 4 ohms at less than 1% THD, and it's really quite interesting. Single-ended, balanced, all that stuff. Let's talk about 3E Audio though real quick, because I had not heard of them until they reached out to me with this amplifier. Well, 3E Audio turns out to be a large manufacturer, OEM manufacturer of Class D amplifier boards, DSP boards, power supplies. Being an OEM manufacturer means they build the product, someone else buys it and incorporates it into that other person's product, and then they sell it out. Well, 3E Audio, this is their first foray into offering a fully finished retail product, but they're not new to the game. And a really interesting company. So let's take a look at the unit real quick. Obviously, volume control on the front. The volume control also is your input selector for our XLR or RCA, or on/off. Now, it does have signal sensing built in, and it will shut itself off after a few minutes with no signal coming in, and it will return on. That's not even a word. It will turn itself back on when it senses a signal. So let's take a look at the back of the unit real quick. We've got our power input, 12 volt trigger. Interesting thing here, a volume defeat. If you just want to use it as an amp and not use the volume control and use something else as a preamp, you can. Speaker inputs, RCA gain boost. You can take it from 25 dB to 28 dB. RCA single-ended in. Balanced input with TRS. So really, really nice, very well configured. One of the interesting things too is you can swap op amps, and you can see them there, although I would not recommend swapping the op amps through these boards. So let's go ahead and open this thing up and swap some op amps, and we'll talk about it then. To get to the inside of the 3E Audio A7, we've got to first pull the volume knob off. There's a 10mm nut there. There are 3 screws along the bottom here that you need to undo, and there are 2 screws on either side on the back. Let me get it disassembled and I'll be right back. All right, so the nut's off the volume control, the screws are out of the bottom, the screws are out of the back. Just push on the volume control and the board will come out, and it actually comes out kind of oriented upside down. And when you flip it over, you want to be super careful not to touch the paste, this white thermal paste that's on the top of the amplifier board. Well, there are op amps that we're going to swap, but real quick, let me reconfigure. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to give you a tour of this board because this is not your normal FunFi product. Well, here we are looking at the inside of the 3E A7 amplifier. And one thing I want you to notice real quick is these are not your normal FunFi binding posts. These are actually really legitimate, very, very well constructed binding posts. Something you'd find on something, much more expensive or you'd consider more upscale. Now, these blue things are all demodulation capacitors, and they're film caps. These 4 black devices that say 7RO on them are actually inductors, and rather than being wound with round wire, copper wire, they're wound with flat copper wire, and I'll try to insert a picture of that here. So flat copper wire is much better for inductors, and again, this is more of an upscale kind of design characteristic. These are all Ruby core capacitors, very high quality. Over here on this side, this is a little op amp, and this whole circuit here takes the single-ended input and converts it into balance to run into the amplifier, because inside this black housing you can't see are two TPA 3255 amp chips. So it runs a full balanced configuration. And we can see that here because these are the OPA 1656 Ti op amps that we're going to swap out. And all of these little small capacitors, you'll see it populate little black ones around the board. These are all Elna Silmic 2 coupling capacitors. These are very well designed. This is really kind of a high-end product. So give me a second to reconfigure and we're going to go ahead and start pulling some op amps. So here we are getting ready to swap the op amps. These are the two TI OPA 1656s. This is actually a TI 5532 NI and we're going to swap them. It is worth it to spend a couple bucks, and if you're going to do this frequently, is to get an op amp puller, a little IC chip puller. I got this on Amazon as part of a kit. I'll put a link in it. I know it's not an affiliate, but you know, just so you can see. Now, the idea is you want to get, there's a slot under here and on both sides, and you want to get the tool in. I don't know if you can see that well. You want to get the tool in underneath and then just give it a gentle wiggle until the chip pops out. These are pretty robust. These have the dip 8 already, excuse me, so you can see it, the dip 8 already built into it. If you don't have any and you're going to swap op amps, go get yourself the dip 8 sockets. These have a more robust pin. So again, we've got one of the TIs out. Let's go ahead and get the other one here real quick. And again, just go under the board and watch out for the paste. I'm always getting that stuff on my hands. So again, just a gentle rock out and we bring out the chip that way. And then on the back here, where we're going to swap that single-ended op amp, again, we're going to go in. This is a little tighter fit under here. Then just pull it right out very gently. Now on these op amps, be super careful of the pins. They're very, very bendable. So what am I going to swap in here? Well, a couple of things. One is I'm just going to take one of the standard TI 1656s and I'm going to put it back here in the balance end. Now, one thing I want you to see is, and hopefully you can, is there's a notch on the socket. Maybe you can see it better here. There's a notch on the socket. And there is a notch on the bottom of the chip itself. You'll see right there that notch. The notches have to line up. I don't want you, and I've harped on this before, but I don't want you blowing up your op amps, especially if you spent money on good ones. So that one's in. Now, for the bigger ones, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these SX52Bs that I got on AliExpress. I'll put a link to them. They're not real expensive, but they're pretty, and they sound pretty good in a couple of things I've tried it on. Now, you'll notice on the bottom, it's printed. There's a notch printed there. And of course, there's a corresponding notch on the socket for the chip. And you just want to line it up real gently. Make sure you get all your pins lined up and just put it in. It's very simple. And let's grab the other one here. And again, we want to double check, make sure, see where that notch is printed on the bottom of it and line it up with the notch on the board. And that's it. We've swapped the op amps. So you could put in Sparkos 3602s. They will fit. I'm not sure I'd put anything bigger than this in here because you've got this capacitor bank back here. However, if you really wanted to, you could probably, with a dip 8 riser, you could probably get a bigger op amp in there. I haven't tried it yet, but it's an option for you. So anyway, let me button this whole thing back up again and we'll talk about how it sounds. Well, hopefully you got an idea looking inside. This thing is actually well constructed. I do think it's a cut above your normal kind of fun-fi Class D amplifier. The quality of the components inside, I didn't mention it, but it's a Rubicon caps. I thought the way that the amplifier, those TPA 3255 chips were encased in that housing, I think from a heat standpoint and I think from an isolation from interference standpoint, really well laid out. The PC board, I noticed, and after I put it all together, as I was putting it together, it is at least a 4-layer PC board, which is unusual. Again, really high quality. And again, I think that's because 3 Audio is an OEM manufacturer of boards for other people, and they've learned some lessons from that. And there was something really interesting about this. Right out of the box, it grabbed my attention. The first time I listened to it, honestly, there was something about it that I thought, there's something special about this amplifier. This is not your normal fun-fi amp. So how did I test it? Well, I did put it in the big room in a normal configuration with the ELAC DBR62s and listened to it as a normal, not near field. And man alive, that first inkling that I had that there was something special about this amp came through. And this is with the stock op amps, came through in the big room it sounded really wonderful. It was very, very good, and we'll get into some more specifics in just a minute. Now, I put it on the desktop, and that's where I used it most of the time near field, just because from a space standpoint, and while I'm editing and just, going through emails and things like that, it was a good companion. I did use the FIO K9 AKM headphone amp DAC. That's my daily driver on the desktop. I did, for a time, put the Duke Audio Q11 DAC in. That's that interesting DAC that's got the ESS chip and the AKM chip. Really fascinating device. I also used the FIO K11, that little R2R DAC. That was really interesting. And then I also ran the Gishelli J2S on it with really, really good results. So for speakers, I used a couple different ones. Obviously, I used the ELACs in the big room. I used the Philharmonic True Mini monitors most of the time on the desktop. These are an excellent, really good, very, believe it or not, very high-end speaker, built very high-end in the $380. Review coming soon. I also, interestingly, I had the PMC Prodigy 1. That's that bookshelf transmission line speaker from TMC. They make studio speakers. That was really, really good. But they're very expensive, and that's not really price appropriate. So I kept the Philharmonics for most of the time. So with the stock op amps, this thing sounded quite good. I used a number of different recordings with the stock op amps and with the upgraded op amps in it. And one of the ones I used quite consistently, obviously, to kind of hear the difference between stock and upgraded op amps, was just my old guy Hi-Fi Test Tracks Volume 1 on Tidal. There's a link in the video description. And there's a bunch of different recordings on there. There's things that I really like that I go back to for testing. Some standout recordings for me on this was Al Di Meola, Mediterranean Sundance, from his Elegant Gypsy CD or album. What a remarkable sound. Really, really good. There's good drive to it. He is one of the fastest. His fingers on the guitar strings, he's just amazing. He was part of Chick Corea's Return to Forever band, and that's where he kind of cut his teeth. Really great track, really good recording, really, really good. So for some vocals on that, in that test track, I used ZZ Ward's Put the Gun Down. This is just a good, gritty, really good bluesy rock song, kind of roots rock. Her voice is great. She plays guitar. She is excellent on it. It's just a really fun, bouncy, really, really good track to listen to. I use it quite often. And then out of the same playlist, I use this recording from Yo-Yo Ma. It is JS Box Cantata BWV 75, Was gut dus was in Wohlgaten, which means whatever God does is well done. It's a great cello piece, wonderful sound, really, really interesting, and I heartily encourage you to listen to it. Now, once I had swapped the op amps in, because I got a good sense for it, and we'll talk about it when I talk about overall sound quality. Once I had upgraded the op amps to those, 52Bs, SX52Bs, I started listening a lot deeper into more stuff. And this recording I use an awful lot. It's from David Arkenstone. It's called In the Wake of the Wind. And it's from 1990. Now, In the Wake of the Wind, David Arkenstone is probably one of the most prolific new age artists. He's won Grammys. He's been nominated a zillion times. Really good multi-instrumentalist, writes some really interesting stuff. Some of it's Celtic, and this is kind of a Celtic new age sound. But it's the first album. It's the first album in a trilogy series that includes Quest of the Dream Warrior and Return of the Guardians. And the music is based on a fantasy tale of this strange wind called Lion's Breath and this young man who wants to vanquish it because it's affecting his community. It's really interesting. This has some really sweeping arrangement. It has some really interesting orchestral instruments to it. It's not just all synthesizers. There's obviously acoustic instruments and electronic. David Arkenstone is a really good guitarist, and so you'll hear electric guitar in here. Really excellent recording. There's some really great. Now, I know the soundstage is manufactured in the studio, but this thing is so engaging, and I've had this since 91. This is really a wonderful album. It's one I go back to all the time. And actually, the album reached #1 on the Billboard New Age charts in 91, and it received a Grammy nomination. So it's interesting, in the track called Morning Sun on the Sails is dedicated to Aaron Copland, who is one of the most famous American composers that we have. What a great, he did Fanfare for the Common Man. If you remember, Emerson, Lake and Palmer did a version of that. And the first track, Papillon, which it was on the wings of a butterfly. And Papillon, if you remember, was that guy, Dustin Hoffman, no, Steve McQueen played him in a movie, Papillon. He was a convict on the French penal colony just north of in Africa. Really, really interesting. Anyway, that track was played once every 20 minutes on a loop at Walt Disney World at the Epcot Center in the Innovations Plaza from 1994 to 2021. So really interesting. The tracks on this one that I keep going back to are a track called Borderlands and another one called Fire Dance. Really interesting. So the next album I used was this album from Herbie Mann called London Underground. And this is a fascinating album. Now, Herbie Mann is a very famous jazz flautist, and he also played clarinet as well. And he is a really interesting guy because he did not stay in one genre for a long time. So this recording, London Underground, was recorded at Olympic Studios in December of 1973. And he was over there for 5 days, and he wound up recording a bunch of cover songs with a bunch of very famous rock musicians. And I think that's really interesting. At this period in time, late 60s, early 70s, Herbie was experimenting with a bunch of different genres. Obviously, rock and roll and R&B and soul was having a big influence on a lot of people, and it influenced him. And he'd been kind of doing that R&B soul sort of recordings prior to this. So he thought he'd dabble in rock and roll and successfully with this album. So in the recording, he features a bunch of covers on a bunch of very famous rock musicians. So on the song Bitches, he's actually got Mick Taylor, who was the guitarist for the Rolling Stones at the time. He also has on drums Ainsley Dunbar, very famous drummer, played with Bowie, played with a lot of other people. He also had Robbie McIntosh on drums for a couple tracks, and Robbie was a drummer for Average White Band. He had Ian MacDonald on alto saxophone. Ian MacDonald was a founding member of King Crimson. Really, really interesting. So standout tracks for me were Bitch by Rolling Stones with Mick Taylor on guitar. But the really big one for me is the cover of Donovan's song Mellow Yellow. And the reason why is Stephen Grappelli plays jazz violin. Now, Stephen Grappelli is a very famous jazz musician. He and Django Reinhardt, very famous jazz guitarist, started in the 30s these recordings that were called the Old Hot Club of France recordings, and very, very interesting through the 30s. Obviously, the war came along and they couldn't do it then, but this kind of vintage jazz, very interesting jazz violin, and then you have Albert Lee, great guitarist, very famous guitarist. 10 years after, playing the acoustic guitar that would have normally been kind of the Django Reinhardt person in the mix with Stephen Grappelli. It's just an absolute standout. Now, not every track on this one is really good. I think the Layla cover is a real clunker, but it is what it is. And I love Herbie Mann, and you got to, if this whets your appetite, dig into his catalog and go find Brazil Again. Just amazing album. So anyway, those are the albums I used. So how did this perform? Well, as I mentioned, it hooked me right off the bat, right out of the box. There was something special about this. And with the stock op amps, I just was immediately taken by its sound quality. It was really good, very smooth, unlike a lot of other Fun-Fi Class D amplifiers. Again, this is priced above that level, but this is really quite good. And at $300, I'll be dead honest with you, I'm not sure I could recommend any other amplifier that would sound better. Now, you can get an amplifier at $300 and maybe it's got some more features, more goes in as and goes out as, maybe a remote control or whatever. I don't think that matters. Obviously, you can defeat the remote control on this and just use it as an amplifier. And then if you pair it up with let's say the Duke Audio DAC Q11, that's a preamp and it's got a remote and volume and all that stuff. You've got a really cool little system for about $470. I think is really, really good sound quality wise. So stock op amps, I thought bass was good. The mid bass, upper mid bass, lower mid range, very good, very detailed. The attack of drums, you could follow bass lines nicely. Really, really good. Mid range was good and smooth and nice, reasonable detail. The treble was, again, good, reasonable detail. Now, when I swapped the op amps, things changed. And it's worth considering doing that. And again, the op amps I use, those SX52Bs, are not very expensive. They're like 15, 16 bucks, something like that. Well worth it. And then taking one of the stock TI OPA 1656s and putting in the other position, again, you're just buying 2 op amps. I found this to then, the detail got much better, the sound quality got much better, the imaging got much better. So bass, I was able to follow bass lines much easier on that Old Guy Hi-Fi Test Tracks Volume 1. There's a Jaco Pastorius track in it, and of course he's a bass player, and you could follow that and his artistry very easily on this. This kicked this up a notch or two without question, swapping op amps. So the drums, everything was great. Kick drums are great. Acoustic bass, electric bass, cello, Yo-Yo Ma's cello was excellent. Ian McDonald's alto sax was excellent. As you move up into the mid-range, Herbie Mann's flute sounded wonderful. There was never any stridency or fatigue to it or harshness to it. ZZ Ward's voice sounded really, really good. Just really nice. Yo-Yo Ma's cello sounded very good. The Arkenstone recording, again in the near field, because there's a breadth of instruments in this. It's very cinematic and very sweeping. All of it was really good, and I could pull out individual instruments. It had that kind of detail. Is this a world beater? It punches above its weight, I think, at 300 bucks compared to other amps in that category. Is it the best thing I've ever heard? No, but it is amazing for a desktop system or a small little starter system, or, if you're at the point where you've done the FunFi thing, this is that next step, I think, before getting into a full-size component. And I would stack this up against some full-size components out there. Really, really good. Now, granted, they're going to have inputs and outputs and maybe remote controls and all that other stuff. But like I said, to make this into an amp, pair it with a DAC, really nice DAC that maybe has an extra input and a remote volume control. You're done. Really good. You can pair it with a lot of different speakers. I used it with the Philharmonic True Mini monitors. Really, really good, good combination. These are truly a high-end speaker at 380 bucks. I did in the big room with the ELAC DBR62s with good success on stands, regular listening. Really nice. It sounded very pleasing. And then for giggles, I brought in the PMC Prodigy 1 transmission line stand mount speakers, which are $1,700 for the pair. And this did a good job with them. So this had good chops, and again, at its price point, and again, the qualifier is at that $300-ish price point. I'm not sure there's much that can touch it. It really sounds that good. Imaging was good. Good center image, good instrument placement, even though almost everything I listened to, the imaging was manufactured in the studio. Everything was where it should be. Everything stayed stable where it should be. I got good texture and tone from the instruments on these recordings because they're all really good recordings. I got the big cinematic sweep of the Arkenstone recording. It really surprised me, and it really kind of caught my attention, and I kind of got smitten with it. I'm kind of smitten with it a little bit. And again, I think at the $300 price point, there's not much that can do better. And I think if you're looking for a second system, you want to upgrade your desktop, you want to maybe go from, one of those $80 or $90 FunFi amps and get something better. I think the A7 from 3 Audio is a really good choice because it also gives the option of balanced. And so it's really, I think, can pair up really well. Take that Fozzy Audio ZD3 DAC. That can be a preamp as well. And you can run balanced into this. And I think you'd really raise your game with it at that point. Anyway, enough babbling about it. The 3E Audio A7, highly recommended. At $300, really highly recommended. Hopefully you could recommend the video. Hopefully you'd be willing to give me a like and a subscribe. And if you wish to support the channel, there's a thank you button at the bottom of the video window if you're watching on a portable device or on your computer. There are also membership links in the pinned comment and in the video description. Again, this is all optional for you guys. If you feel like you want to help the channel out, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. There will be a link to the 3 Audio webpage for purchasing this. I have no affiliation with them, so I've got no skin in the game when it comes to that. I just really like the product and recommend it. So there'll be a link in the video description. There are affiliate links in there if you're interested in getting that Duke Q11 or the Fozzy ZD3. There'll be an affiliate link for those. There is my playlist in there, and again, we use the Old Guy Hi-Fi Test Tracks Volume 1. There is Volume 2. I've been adding some tracks to those. And I apologize, I need to do a better job of keeping up on it. Please comment, let me know, where are you at in your journey? Is this something that might be of interest to you? What do you think of the music I suggest? Please keep the comments kind of short if you can. I know I get a lot of people asking advice. If I haven't reviewed the product, I can't render an opinion on it. Also too, it's getting, as the channel's growing, and it's growing wonderfully, and thank you guys so much, it's getting harder and harder for me to respond to absolutely every comment, especially when they're long and with a lot of questions in them. I do read all the comments, and if I can find the moment to do so, I will answer. It may be a brief answer, but again, if you're asking me about a product I haven't reviewed, I'm sorry, I can't render an opinion, and I'm not going to make something up. I'm not going to bullshit you, I promise that. Anyway, thank you so much. Comment, let me know. Subscribe, like, comment, follow me on Instagram if you want to. I think I've said everything I need to say about this. My name's Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel, and it's now your turn to sit back and listen. Maybe at your desktop, maybe on a really cool little Class D amplifier that's a cut above the rest, and find some wonderful music, maybe something I suggested. Sit back, relax, enjoy your day, and find some inner peace. Thanks so very much for your time. Have a wonderful day.
Old guy hi-fi talking true. Stereo dreams he shares with you. Feel the rhythms break through. Music's heartbeat soft but true.